So can you introduce yourself for me and what your role was at the library and how you worked there?
Do you want me to go through the whole role or the final role?
Anything that you want.
Okay. My name's Carol Nutter, and I started out first as a Title II secretary bookkeeper. I worked my way through the ranks, and when I left in 2007, I was the assistant dean for public services.
What was it like working there?
I loved it. I loved it. It was interesting because I've always had a love affair with books, and so when I started there, books were the big thing. By the time I left, it was more computers than it was books, but I enjoyed it very much. I loved working with people, and I was in public services most of the time, so I got to work with people a lot.
What was it like switching from more like a lot of books to more like technology?
Well, when I was there, we went through the process of changing from the card catalog to the online catalog, and I was very involved with that. We were still using books quite a bit when I left. I left in 2007, so there's been a lot more change to non-books since then. But it was beginning to change. You know, when I was in library school, they said by the year, I think they said 2000, there won't be any books, you know, which of course hasn't panned out, but it's moving that way. It really is.
How do you feel about that?
Mixed feelings, I think. Finding information is a whole lot easier anymore, but the trouble is there's so much information, and if you're not careful about what sources you're looking at, you can get a lot of misinformation. Of course, I guess that was true with books too, but you know, I still love books, but I will tell you I love my Kindle, so I read a lot on Kindle. Yeah.
What brought you to the Camden-Carroll Library?
I was looking for a job, and one of my neighbors told me there was a position open, and I applied for it. It was actually a soft money sort of thing. It was a Title II grant. We were to buy books that were high interest, low vocabulary to send out to the public libraries. And I was hired as the secretary bookkeeper to select the books, make sure they were mailed out to the libraries, and you know, keep account of the funds and so forth. And that's where I started, and it was a part-time position.
So how'd you end up getting the job as the secretary? Not secretary, is it assistant dean that you said?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you end up getting that job?
Well, it was a long process. Okay, I started out in that position. It was a 1-year contract, so I had no idea at the end of that year what was going to happen. At the end of the year, there was a position open in acquisitions, so I moved over one room to the acquisitions, and I was in charge of doing the vouchers to pay for the books that we ordered for the library. I worked at that for I think a year, and then I moved, a position came open in the Learning Resource Center, which was the audiovisual section, and I moved down to that because I really wanted to be out in public services. I knew that's where my heart was. I worked down there for a while, and I'll have to say there was a librarian named Al Evans, and he was the first one to encourage me to go to library school. He said, "You really need to go to library school." I'd never even thought about it. I was working on a degree in sociology, was almost there. From that position, I moved into another soft money sort of thing. It was an interlibrary loan position, and I worked for that for a while, and then from that I moved into reference. I worked in reference for a while, and then I became head of reference, and then I think late 90s, we did a little reorganization, and our director named 2 assistant librarians, one for technical services, which is cataloging and acquisitions, and one for public services, which is all the areas that serve the public. And I was named it, so.
Did you like it?
Yes, I did. I liked it. Can
you talk about a little bit what you did?
Well, when it started out, I was over reference and periodicals. We had a periodical section, and then this was before I was actually, I think, named assistant director. But then he put periodicals and circulation under me, and then he added the archives, and so I had all these different areas. I had worked in some of them, and I had good heads in all the departments. So you know, it was more, sort of a coordination thing. But I think the thing that I did the most, I did a lot of reorganizations to get raises for my people. rename what they did, write up their job descriptions to really reflect what they did, because staff at the library were underpaid. So I did a lot of those, and we were successful in getting a lot of people raises and new titles and that sort of thing. I did a job, what do you call them, career ladder, that allowed some of them to move up and get promotions by doing educational things and so forth. I was really proud of that. They did away with it after I left, but anyway, it was a good thing. So I think my big thing was working with staff and trying to improve their lots, their salaries and so forth.
So did you get to work underneath Dr. Jack Ellis?
Yes.
What was that like?
Dr. Jack Ellis hired me. Yes, he was an interesting fellow. Yeah, he hired me, and he was a good director. I really don't know. He did a lot of things for me. He helped me along the way, gave me encouragement.
So do you remember when the library started using computers?
It would have been in the 80s, but I couldn't tell you the exact date. It's been a long time. I've been retired since 2007, so I probably forgot more than I knew. So.
What was it like changing to start using computers?
It was hectic. We actually had a librarian or two that retired because they just didn't want to deal with that. Some that had been there a long time and were really used to the books and the card catalog and so forth. But I thought it was a challenge. The advent of internet was probably more exciting to me even than the card catalog, and trying to get in on the ground floor of that and work it into the way the library worked and so forth. And the director at that time was Larry Bazant, and he really was on my case all the time. You've got to get with the internet, and he wanted us to teach classes in it and so forth, and we did do that. So yeah, it was an exciting time, challenging time, but fun.
What was it like using the internet too in the library?
Well, again, challenging, and it was new. We were learning. I remember going to a workshop to learn how to use a mouse. Which sounds funny, but I can remember sitting there, trying to learn how to do those motions to use a mouse. So that was a long time ago, but it was interesting. I like new things. It was interesting.
So, can you talk about? I was told that you served on the faculty senate.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
We were not faculty. We were not considered faculty. We were considered staff. The librarians were considered staff. So a couple or three of us really asked to be added to the faculty senate. We met with the president. We went through all this, trying to explain what our role was and why we were more faculty than we were staff. That we were involved in the educational process. We might not be in a room teaching, but we were teaching the other end of it. When people were doing their research, we were teaching them how to do their research. We were very much a part of the education process. And we were successful in being added to the faculty senate, and it was interesting. I actually served as chair of the faculty senate. I think the only librarian that has done that, so I'm sort of proud of that, yeah.
What did you have to do as chair of the faculty?
Well, I chaired the meetings, worked with the committees, chaired the executive committee, so forth. It was interesting. We had some opposition from some faculty, let's put it that way, that really didn't think we belonged there. So it was always a constant trying to convince them that we did belong there. And some people were convinced and some weren't, but it was a good experience to be on the Senate.
That's a weird thing that they did not consider you guys faculty members.
Yeah, I understand there may be some movement right now to change some things. So yeah.
So was there any renovations or expansions to the library while you were there?
Yes, the tower was built while I was there.
What was it like just getting that all adjusted?
Oh man, it was it was interesting. Helen Williams, I think you interviewed her. I know she was working in the director's office at that time, and she had the job of picking out furniture and doing all that. But I just remember the mess, all that construction and everything that was going on. But it was exciting to have that expansion and have that much more room, the archives got to move over there and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was an interesting time.
Did they like constantly move around like places in the library while you was there?
You mean like different departments
Yeah.
moving? Not so much. I mean, with the tower open, of course, obviously we moved some things, a lot of things over there. But no, I don't remember there being a lot of change. There were small changes, but not as far as we're going to move this section to this section, that sort of thing. I think the Learning Resource Center moved. It was down in the basement of the first edition. And then when the tower opened, it moved over into the first floor of the tower. That was one of the big changes I remember, that gave them so much more room. But reference pretty much, stayed where we were. Now they've been really changed, I understand. I don't know, is there still a reference department? I don't think there is.
If there is, it's very small.
Of course, when I was there, we thought the reference department was the most important. But of course, everybody thought that, I guess, that their department was the most important. But, it sort of agrees me that the reference department's gone. But people are doing their own research now. So.
How much of the library was used for, like, actual library?
Pretty much the whole thing at that time. I mean, the Learning Resource Center was sort of different because it was audio visuals. And that was the first place we put a bank of computers where students could come in and use computers. And then we also had a bank of computers in the reference department once we got the online catalog, because obviously they had to have those to get into the catalog. But, yeah.
Part of the reason I asked that is because the library from the first expansion is now used for like a career services area.
Right.
And then the part of the first floor is used for tutoring and learning. And then there's a lot of advising offices there. So
oh, yes. Yeah, that's, most of that has come about since I've been gone.
So while I was going through pictures, I saw that there was a protest going on during the dedication of the library tower. Do you recall that even?
I do not. What was the protest?
It was towards Julian Carroll. He had some mishaps. He had denied medical helicopter services to South Kentucky, and I saw some.
I guess I was inside the library and didn't even know what was going on. If I knew about it, I don't remember it now. That's a long time ago. So no, I don't remember that.
It was odd. I saw pictures and nobody called it. I'm like, this is so odd that it's such a lost piece of memory.
Well, that is interesting. Yeah.
This is also recalling. Do you remember being part of a video called The Library Zone?
Vaguely,
Do
yes.
you want to see it? I have it.
Sure.
I ran across it, and it was a VHS tape that had your name on the front of it, and I was like, oh, this is weird. What is this? And I played it, and
I vaguely remember we working on a script for it. Yeah, and I think it was sort of cheesy, as I remember.
Libraries today have collections, cataloging systems, circulation, and reference. Today's libraries also present their information in a much more accessible form. Let's take a look at what's possible.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Oh.
You work here at the library? I sure do, and you look like you need some help. What's wrong? How can you help me? I sure can. What do you need? Well, I'm supposed to find evidence on the pros and cons of capital punishment. Okay, well then you need to start the reference fix. Reference? I don't even know where that is. Well, calm down. I mean, that's what the librarians are here for, to help you use the resources.
Oh, there I am.
My friend here, he needs help with reference. Okay, that is
Oh, my Lord.
evidence on the pros and cons of capital punishment.
Okay, well, how much do Now, in addition to the books that we located in the catalog, I have a couple of books here I want you to look at. This is editorial research reports. This will give you a background, a historical background
1,000 years ago.
This is a reproduction of actual editorials that were published in major newspapers in the country. So you should be able to find opinions pro and con, obviously. Okay, well, now in addition to these, there's some other places in the library you'll want to go. Be sure and go to the periodicals department, use the indexes there. And you'll also want to go up to 4th floor and use the government documents. Okay?
Thanks, Mrs. Hunter. I was afraid I wasn't going to find anything on this topic at all. All I have to do now is just ask. Thanks.
Gosh.
You know how long ago that was?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I want to think it was after Larry Bazant came, because he was big on that kind of stuff, but I can't, I'm sorry, I don't remember. Well, thank you for sharing that.
No,
Reminded me that I was young, was. So,
Did you guys do that kind of stuff all the time?
no. Mm-mm.
What was it like just being a part of that?
I told you I hate cameras. I don't like being on camera. So I probably didn't enjoy it particularly. But anyway.
Is there any specific memory that stands out to you after all these years?
I think the career ladder, doing that and being able to give the staff an opportunity to advance without having to do a reorganization and all that to do it. I think the year that I was faculty senate chair, I was also president of the Kentucky Library Association. So that was a busy year, a stressful year, but it was a good year. I enjoyed it a lot. No, I have so many memories. It's hard to even pinpoint one right now. And sometimes I feel like the library was another life, you know. I've been retired 18 years, so it's been a long time since I was there. But overall, I think my memories are good. I really enjoyed working there. Larry Bazant was a wonderful director. I really enjoyed working for him. So.
Did you get to work underneath Faye Delta when she was assistant?
She was assistant director when I was hired, and I worked very closely with her because she sort of supervised me in that Title II grant program because she was kind of, I guess, sort of over that grant. So she was probably, I would call her my direct supervisor at that point, yeah.
So you had mentioned just a second ago being president of the Kentucky Library Association. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, most of the librarians were involved in that association. Of course, it's our state association. I was involved with it for years. Was really surprised when they called me and asked me to serve. They did a slate of officers. It wasn't an election. They did a slate and presented it. It just happened that it came 2 or 3 days after I was elected to the chair of the faculty senate, and I remember going to Larry Bazan and saying, "Can I do both of these in the same year?" And he said, "Yeah, you could do it." So it was interesting. I got to plan the state convention. We did it on freedom of speech. I remember when the Patriots Act came out and there was so much controversy. Well, it was about that time, and so we did it. We had an FBI man who came in and talked about the Patriot Act, and then we had other views of it. But it was an interesting conference. I remember our program had the Statue of Liberty on it, and talked about what library's role in freedom of speech and that sort of thing.
So when I talked to Betty and Linda, they both mentioned about going to UK night classes to help
Yes.
with degree.
Yeah.
And Betty had mentioned that you also went with them.
Yes.
Can you talk
She and Linda Lowe and I commuted. Betty and I commuted a lot, and then Linda was with us a few classes. But we would go at night. That interlibrary loan position that I had was a 9-month, 4-hour day program or job, and so I had my afternoons and evenings off, and I had my summers off. So it was a good opportunity to try to go to library school. As I said, I'd finished my degree in sociology and had landed a social work position. And about the time I turned my resignation in and was leaving the library, the governor put a freeze on all state jobs, and so the social work position was frozen. So I was sort of caught between positions, and I worked in an interim position for a while. But anyway, Dr. Ellis called me and asked me to come back in a librarian position. It was a part-time, and so I thought, well, now's the time, to get that library degree. So I started commuting. Betty, I think, was already taking some classes, so she and I commuted a lot. We, at least once every week, we were on the road to UK, and then Linda went with us sometimes. So it was, I worked, I think, 2 years taking classes that way, and then because I was off in the summer, when I got close enough, I just needed 3 classes. I went to UK and lived in the dorm. I had 2 children, 2 little preschool children at home, was married, but I went and lived in the dorm and finished my degree that summer. So, and then I started that fall in a position, library position.
What was it like balancing working at the library and going to the night classes?
It's kind of a blur. I mean, I look back sometimes and think, did I do that? Because by the time I was finishing, my children were in T-ball and Little League and that sort of stuff, and I was balancing that. Well, no, I guess that was the second masters I worked on when that was going on. But anyway, yeah, it was hard. I'd come home on weekends. My mother-in-law came and stayed and took care of the children while I was down there that summer. But yeah, balancing a job and doing classwork and all that, yeah, it was being a mother, and yeah, it was hard, but it was worth it. It was worth it.
Do you have any, was there any library traditions or special events that stood out to you?
You mean within our library? We always had a Christmas party. I just remember those Christmas parties. They were fun. So I can't think of anything right off. So.
Was there a change in how many staff members there while you was working?
Oh yeah. When I started, there were, I think, 7 or 8 catalogers. By the time I left, we were down to maybe 3 or 4. The reference librarians, as people retired, positions weren't filled. So yeah, the staff reduced quite a bit by the time I left. Yeah.
Do you feel like in-person uses of the libraries are changing?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think where people used to, like in that cheesy video, people were sort of dependent on the librarian when they came in. They didn't know where to start. The internet's changed all that. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. As I said, sometimes I think people just think the internet's there and anything it tells me is true. I think they still need some guidance on what's legitimate and what's, what they can trust. But people are more independent, I think, in their information gathering than they were, when I started years ago.
Do you miss working there?
Honestly, I've been retired 18 years. I've loved every minute of it. I loved my job when I was there, but I can't really say that I've missed it that much. I've missed the people. I've missed working with people, and feeling like I was doing something helpful. But I love my life as a retired person too. So.
Do you have any final thoughts or comments you would like to add?
No, not really. I run into people that still work there, and they say, "Oh, you would believe how things have changed." They used to, when I first retired, they say, "Can you come back? Can you come back?" But change is inevitable, and it's not always. It's always hard, but it's not always bad. Change needs to come. So I think it's interesting the way the library has evolved, and people are finding information in different ways now, but information will always be important.
You got anything else?
No.
Well,